put some indicators of times that you should spend, and you should walk into the exam room knowing what time you're going to finish with what, and be strict with yourself. For instance, today I know I've got 2 hours to do this presentation, and I've got quite a lot of slides, so I'm timing myself, and a little alarm's going to go off after 40 minutes so that I know I've got to move on from poetry now, because I love poetry and I can't spend my life on poetry, then I will neglect the others. So you have to do the same so that you give both of those genres your time, because even if you're not good at one of them, you can't afford to leave out a section. 0 out of 25 is too difficult to recover from. So even if you go and you just write the story, you're going to get more marks than if you leave that section out. Right, let's move on then to the poetry. And this is a guide to the types of things that you should be able to comment on when you look at a seen poem or an unseen poem. So from what the teacher has taught you and you have explored together in your groups and so on, I know that you have been writing some summaries for yourself of what each poem is about. And I know you've got study guides and all sorts of resources online, but nothing beats actually taking your pen and also writing your own summary. Somehow the material sticks in your brain when you put in that effort. So try to write a little summary for yourself of the structure. And in some poems, the structure is more important than others, but it is always a choice in the poet's mind. So why did he have long lines or short lines? How many stanzas? How do they get linked? What is the rhyme scheme? And you know, this has been taught to you, so you learn it, but you must also be able to know it, not learn it off by heart, but be able to work out the rhyme scheme yourself and to know why you're working it out, because it helps you to understand. We might look at the punctuation, and you should write down anything where there's some important punctuation. And then we come to diction. You can see I've put a little star there because we know that in the exam, they are probably going to focus their essay questions on diction, imagery, and tone. But it will not be tell me about the diction, the imagery, and the tone. It will be how does the diction link to the theme or the message of the poem? How does the imagery help to share the message of the poem? And how does the tone help to share the message of the poem? So we are never just randomly talking about these things. We are linking them to the message. And then, of course, you must make sure that you're comfortable with the figures of speech. That is something you can go and study. And I like to put them into groups. So we have comparisons. Those include the similes and the metaphors and personification. And we must look at how this helps the writer to bring across his point. Sometimes you have to answer on the effectiveness of something. And then you can use this little formula. Just as a whip can inflict pain and cuts, so the mean words cause pain and cut through all illusions of acceptance. So if I say, what is effective about saying that she whipped me with her tongue, then I would say, just as a whip can cause pain, so words also can cause pain. Therefore, this is an effective comparison. It helps me to understand the damage caused by the words. Sometimes we have opposites like oxymoron, irony, sarcasm, dramatic irony, and these help us to see a surprise or a contrast or some kind of unexpected outcome. It helps us to be more aware, it wakes us up a bit, and it can also bring in humor. We also have things like hyperbole and apostrophe, metonymy, allusion, synopticy. And so you at least must be able to answer when the examiner uses those words. And you must also be able to use it if you need to when you are talking about how these things help to bring across the message. So tone is the attitude of the writer to the subject matter. And please notice that we must look at the shifts in tone. It's very rare that we're going to say this poem has this tone and the whole of Dorian Gray has that tone. No, generally tones shift. Even in a conversation with your friend, the tone will not be the same at the end of the conversation as it was in the beginning. So it's far more meaningful to say that the tone over here was this, and then it shifted over there to be something else at the end. And this helps us to understand the theme and the message of the poem. We want to know what mood is, and this is the feeling or atmosphere that is brought about in the reader. In some cases, even in the whole poem for the speaker, but generally it's easier to think of it as the atmosphere. And then we will see what the literal meaning is. These are the exact words that are defined in the dictionary, but then we will also have to find the figurative meaning. And these are created sometimes by poetic devices, which are not entirely figures of speech. There might be emotive words and rhetorical questions and so on. Then we also can find great use in finding sound devices. So things like alliteration, assonance, and onomatopoeia. And this can affect the rhythm and the pace or the impact on the tone, because soft sounds like and th and sh seem to bring a soothing, gentle rhythm, whereas harsh sounds can be quite violent and add to the sense of violence if that is what the person is talking about. When we come to the theme and the message, we want to know what the main ideas that the poet wants the reader to consider. And the theme might be a universal theme that we could find in all of the poems, but it should certainly not be expressed as one word. For example, in most of the dramas, we have appearance versus reality. It's very difficult to express that theme with one word. And then we also are going to have emotional response, where the reader responds to the poem emotionally. But this has caused problems because some people just write about their feelings. And this is a great danger if you feel strongly about this. For example, perhaps it's a poem about women's rights, and you are very militant about women's rights. And then when you answer in the exam, you spend a lot of time talking about how women should be treated and so on, and you forget that you actually are supposed to be basing your response on the poem. So you must justify your answer by referring to something in the poem that has evoked these ideas and these feelings in you. It can't just be, well, my brother bullies me, and so therefore I think women should have more power. It must be the poet has said this, and he has said it with this attitude. I can see it in that emotive word, and therefore I know that this feeling has been aroused in me by the poet's skill. Right, so now those are the things that you're going to look for in every poem, and you make notes on that. And then this is also your guideline on how to study the unseen poem when you come across it. You're not just going to jump in and answer it as if you were looking at a magazine while waiting for a bus. You're going to really study it before you apply your pen to paper. And please let me...
Sorry, Michelle, once you're done with that, can I just take over for like 2 seconds?
Sure. Before I give it over, I just want to say we must be careful. More and more we are getting warned that the essays might not just be on diction, imagery and tone. It can also be on structure and on things like mood and rhetorical devices. All right. Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for that lovely introduction to the poetry. I would just like to take a few minutes to give Mr. Magwakwa the opportunity to introduce himself. He is our Chief Director of the Johannesburg region, and I'd like to give him a few minutes to just give an introduction and speak to the learners as well as the educators. Sir, you're most welcome to unmute, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fatima, and I'm already enjoying the lesson by Michelle. Thank you so much, Michelle. My name is Dennis Makwakwa. I'm the Chief Director for the Johannesburg region, the mighty region in the Gauteng province. I want to take this opportunity to welcome our beautiful learners and also welcome our hard-working and committed teachers who are making a huge difference in the lives of these learners. but also our facilitators who are actually working 25 hours just to make sure that our teachers are supported and our learners are doing well. Just as a way of just indicating this program was really initiated because as a region, our target is 100%. By 100%, I mean every learner in our school must be able to pass at the end of the year. Although we've given districts different targets, on average, we are saying every district must at least get 90%. So when we looked at our second term results, what we discovered is that we're sitting at 82%. It means we're not reaching our target of 90%. And the only subject that is creating a problem for us to reach that 90% is English home language, hence this project. So I'm wanting to believe that if all of us can make sure that we do our best when it comes to English home language, chances are that we'll be able to even get 95% because majority of our learners are failing English home language and it's becoming a crisis in our region. And I'm thinking that this type of a project, if we all attend and we all focus, there shouldn't be a problem at the end of the day. Already I can see where the problems are, the selection of the poems, how we approach poems and essays. So if we focus on those notes that we've been given and everything that all our facilitators are saying this afternoon, I think we are on the right track. So I don't want really to waste time, but I'm wanting to say, let's take this opportunity. Let's make the best out of this opportunity. Let's show that as a region, Johannesburg in particular, we are a region that produces the best. We are a region that produces the stars. And our learners must really understand that if you fail a home language, even if you get distinctions in all your subjects, we are still going to fail the exam. So it is important that we focus on home language and make sure that we at least get 40%. I'm hoping the facilitators will also assist us to identify what we call quick wins, to say what's the easiest way of getting your first 40% so that you can be comfortable to say, when it comes to English, I'm done. I am going to pass because my English is above 40% and I'm on the right track in terms of achieving my results at the end of the year. So Jenny, Fatima, and everybody from the different districts, thank you so much for pushing this program. And I'm hoping this is not the last session, but I'm requesting that all our teachers, as you go back to your schools, try and recap in terms of what was discussed today so that learners can actually contextualize this and make it a point that they get exercises and other activities that will drill down the approach to answering some of these questions. With that, I want to thank you so much, and I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy the session. Thank you, and over to you, Fatima.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Thank you for those motivational words. I feel like I think it has resonated with all of us that your heart is definitely in the English home language for the region and that your heart is in the right place when it comes to wanting all our learners to perform well and pass. We are grateful that we have your presence with us, and we are absolutely delighted that your force is behind us, and we are sure that we are going to not only hit 95, but definitely 100% for the entire Johannesburg region. And for that, I hand over back to Michelle to take over.
Thank you, Fatima, and thank you, sir. I do feel so encouraged knowing that we've got people behind us, and I think that with that force behind us, we can only do well. All right, let's move along because there's a lot here to go through. All right, so this is the kind of empty sheet you should have when you revise, and then you should be writing notes on all of these things. So what I would want to show now is that the poetry essay is a quick win for you. You are encouraged to answer the poetry essay, but you must make sure that you answer what is asked. So you must look out for highlighted words in the question. Don't just offer an analysis of the poem. The markers are looking for a specific content that is expressed in the question. How do you structure it? You're going to have an introductory paragraph that states what you're going to discuss, the body where you will talk about the three aspects, but always linking to the message of the poem, and then a concluding paragraph that is just 2 or 3 sentences summarizing what you've said and emphasizing that you have answered the question. So with the poetry essay, we don't expect a long introduction and a long conclusion, but you should at least give 2 examples of each of those factors in order to earn your marks. And of course, if there's a shift there, that is a more meaningful response. Right, let's put it into practice. We're now going to go and look at some examples of scene poems for the poetry essay and for the contextual questions. And we're going to try and use our skills to analyze the unseen poem when it comes along. Once we've practiced all of these ways of answering questions, we will be able to answer the same types of questions on the unseen poem. All right, so I'm just going to run through all of the poems, because what I've realized is, if you prepare for one essay, poetry essay, because that's a quick win, you cannot leave any of the poems out. You must be able to write an essay on all of the poems, because only one poetry essay will be given of the scene poems, and so you must be ready for all of them. So remember, Prayer to Masks. This is a celebration of African people, and looking at the relationship by Africa and Europe, and contemplating the consequences of colonialism. So we are interested in the structure and the style, because remember, those are things they could throw in if they've run out of questions to ask on the literature essay. They might start turning to structure and style. So we must remind ourselves of, in this poem, direct speech and conversational style with rhetorical questions. All right, so here is a typical exam question. Prayer to Masks is a poem about endurance in the face of oppression. All right, so that is what they are telling you the message of the poem is. By referring to the diction, imagery, and tone, discuss the validity of the statement. Validity means just say whether you think it's true or not, do you agree or not. So what are you going to do? You're going to do that. Introductory paragraph, name the poet, the poem, and make a statement either agreeing to the theme or not agreeing. So you're going to also give a hint as to what diction, imagery, and tone you're going to use. Then you're going to have your paragraph with diction, and you're going to quote the words and integrate them into your sentence. You're not going to say something like, and I quote, or in line 5, or in Act 2 when we get to those. You're going to integrate it so a person can just read it and enjoy. You're also going to write on the imagery and how it develops the theme, and not just one. So a minimum of 2 of each of these. And when you get to the paragraph on tone, you must name the tone and then show how it's expressed and how it develops the theme. So if you're going to look at 2 tone words, then of course we want to see that shift. And then we're going to have a conclusion that shows how you have actually proven your thesis. All right, so that is telling you how to do it. And now maybe we can have a look, rather than just saying what you must do, looking at applications of actual questions. So let's look at number 1. Remember, you have to underline or circle your instruction verb. And here we have comment on the fact that the speaker greets the ancestors in silence. Some learners don't know what to do when they're asked to comment. But this is the type of thing. The silence in which the speaker needs to greet the ancestors is to emphasize the attention he shows when greeting them and the respect he has for them. So we are saying that he greets them in silence. We are explaining and making meaning out of this. So it is because of his great respect. And then here's a nice little one just to check what you know. Why are the women not there? Because they're banned from that place. We don't want to be untruthful. Right, you do often get a quote. You have composed this image, this my face that bends over the altar of white paper. To whom does this refer? So that's a nice 1-mark question, and it's easy to answer. Remember, in the poetry or even in the others, you're going to get questions on what is there, and then how is this done? That is really all we're about all the time. What is happening and how did the writer make that happen? So to whom does this refer? Explain the meaning of bending over the altar of white paper. So yeah, you will just bring in your understanding of that. But yeah, for number 4, comment on the tone being used. So we can't just name the tone, but we must name it first, and then we're going to comment on it. So you see there, he is pleading, imploring with them, showing strong emotions with the ancestor spirits. So the tone is imploring, but we are commenting on the fact that he is feeling strongly about the ancestors. And then number 5, what is the effect of linking the despotism of line 10 in Europe to line 11? So the French colonial despotic rulers of France controlled the colony. Africa was therefore connected to Europe through this colonial past. What I'm trying to show you there is you need knowledge of the poem. This is not like paper 1 where your answer is just going to, if they say find the answer in paragraph 1, and you go to paragraph 1 and you find the answer. Yeah, what we are largely doing is saying, do you know the background of this poem? Do you know the history of the poem? This is important because you've studied this, and now that's going to come to bear in this question if it is related. All right, so just another kind of question, identify and explain the contrast in the line. So sometimes they use a word like juxtaposition and people don't know what to do with that. So just understand sometimes contrasts are important. Right, here's another poetry essay you could get. The poem Prayer to Masks grapples with the question of whether the appeal to the ancestral spirits will be able to help the African overcome the present state of subjugation and hopelessness. So sometimes it's a word that's used in the question that causes a problem, like subjugation. But that is why when you are going through the poem, you try different examples of exam papers and so on, and by now you understand how to divide a word up. Sub means under, so maybe subjugation means when the African person has been put under the colonial people. All right, so we must have close reference to diction, imagery, and tone. What a surprise. And so we are going to now go have a look at that first paragraph there. In the poem Prayer to Masks, the poet makes a passionate plea to his ancestors for guidance and inspiration. The speaker addresses the masks directly. So that is just our introductory paragraph. And then you see we go on to the speaker embraces the past. Throughout the poem, the narrator addresses the spirits of the dead directly, keeping their memories alive and emphasizing that honoring the past is crucial and benefit. If I was marking this, I'm asking myself, is this answering on diction, imagery, or tone? In fact, apostrophe, directly speaking to the ancestors, is giving me an image, and also there is tone involved there, but it would be better if it was directly named. The speaker greets the ancestors with silence. Oh, there's my little alarm going off. So that's telling me I must move it with the poetry. You see, you've got to watch yourself the same way. And we have this image of the speaker talking about his family's guardian, which is a lion. And that also helps us to see that his ancestors are protective. All right, so I'm just here trying to show you the kinds of questions you can get and ways that we could respond to them. So I just want to show you their conclusion there, which helps. The poem ends on a note of optimism. The African of the future will have a different relationship to the soil. These new Africans will absorb the powers of the natural spirits through the rhythm of dance, music, and poetry. So the speaker dances to the masks, and that is where he gets his sustenance. And so that's a lovely conclusion to obviously an argument that went on to bring us to this point. All right, here is the poetry essay marking grid, which I know you've all seen and come to love. But notice how, if you are trying to pass, you want to be in the moderate column there. Fair interpretation of the topic, some good points in support, some arguments supported, but evidence is not always convincing, basic understanding of the poem. So if you didn't quite hit the nail on the head with giving 2 examples and showing the shift in tone and so on, you might find yourself in the moderate or skillful. Because we know that the question is going to look like this, it's unlikely that people will get into the exam and not understand the question. But in order to do really well, in-depth interpretation of the topic, range of striking arguments, extensively supported from the poem, that's where you've got 2 or 3 examples of what you're trying to say, and excellent understanding. But now that's giving us 6 marks. To earn our other 4 marks, we must have, if we look at 4, coherent structure, argument well structured, deeply developed, language, tone and style mature, virtually error-free. Only virtually error-free. So you can even have a little mistake here and there. But notice this has got to be formal writing, present tense, and therefore you can get your 4 marks if you've practiced a lot and you are in the habit of writing in that way. So practice makes perfect there, and you can get a really good mark for your poetry essay. All right, another poem we might look at is Solitude. Remember, that is the one And it has a rhyme scheme that is quite set, but we have to be able to talk about why this helps to bring across the mood. And we found that she's really saying that when you are alone, people tend not to spend time with you. And look at this nice way that you can summarize your things. The tone might be cynical and sad. The mood is reflective and melancholic. So if you're battling with tone, her attitude is a little bit sad and cynical, but your feeling is a little bit melancholy, which means sad. It brings us down a little bit when we read this poem. So all people are in solitude, and we sometimes find that people avoid us when we are sad, which is sad. All right, then we come to these what questions. So if we look at question 1 here, laugh and you know what, this is another point. Often in the exam, they will give you a quote, but then they only give you those ellipsis dots. You cannot try to answer the question without going and highlighting that line in the text of the contextual passage and then answering, because, you know, nobody can answer on this broken little piece. But it says, by referring to the diction used, explain the message in these lines. So yeah, you're going to state the message, and then you're going to quote the words that help to develop the theme. And then coming to number 2, but it's just an explain question and it's only worth 2 marks. So sometimes this is an entry-level question because it's just really telling us that we must say what the message is and then which words bring it. Then number 2, discuss the effectiveness of the image used in the context of the poem. So you see, this is a typical kind of literature question where we find the image in that line, but now we must stretch it to other parts of the poem. So we're going to explain how it's effective, because it says discuss the effectiveness of the imagery, just as this is like this, so that is like that. I can get a picture of what is happening, but then I must say what happens in another part of the poem, which also brings this across. So it's effective in the whole poem. All right, sometimes you can get a question on structure, and you know, if you can do it in the contextual question, you're going to be able to do it in the essay. So really, they ask the same sorts of things, whether it's the contextual or the essay. So if we describe the structure, we mustn't just say it's a poem. It's a poem that is in 3 stanzas, and each one has 8 lines. The stanzas are octaves, and they have a rhyme scheme of A, B, C, D, E, F, E. This is all that was asked for 2 marks. Don't go now and think that you have to link this to something else. Read the question and leave it at that. Number 2 says, using your own words, explain the point the speaker makes. So that is easy. You're just going to explain what she's saying in your own words. Don't copy from the poem. Number 3, discuss the relevance of the title, Solitude. What do they mean when we say relevance? Now again, we have to talk a little bit about the rest of the poem so that we can say that solitude or aloneness fits in with the rest of the poem. And then there's an essay topic. The poem Solitude, the poet does not give a very encouraging picture of the nature of humans in general. So you see why you can't just go through past papers and take a topic, learn the answer off by heart and think that you're going to get into the exam. They might give you different themes or different images, but then still link it to diction, imagery and tone. So you must practice, because often, I mean, it's the same poem, you're going to use the same examples, but you're going to use it to prove something slightly different. So if I look at the second paragraph here, the title of the poem refers to humans who are distant from those who seek happiness. The idea that human beings are not attracted to negativity is repeated in the poem. The poet stresses that although we must bear our hardships alone, we should understand that happiness and grief are part of the human condition and we should remain resilient. So there, that final stanza there is helping me to come to terms with this negative side of things. You know, sometimes it's good to know that you have to be self-sufficient. All right, I'm not going to read all of that now because I think we've given you an idea of what to expect there. And then we can go to the peach tree, which many people love. So here we have free verse. And there's the same sort of pattern and word choice in stanzas 3, 7, 8, and 9. There's indentation, and there's colloquial diction, feeling conversation as if we are part of this discussion and the speaker is speaking to us with words like us and let's. Just a warning, I've seen often they don't give marks for diction if you use pronouns like you and us in your answer. You need to also link it to something more meaningful. All right, so here, theme, decent conversation needs to happen between white and black people for things to change. Good, so what could we have as a question? Come on, let's talk to the devil himself, it's about time, something like that. By taking the tone into account, comment on the significance of these lines. So again, what do they want from me when they say comment on the significance? So here I have to show how these lines enforce what the rest of the poem is trying to say. So you must state the tone, paraphrase the lines, and then explain how these lines reinforce the tone and show why they are important. That's the significance part. So there you need to show how other parts of the poem link to these lines and therefore how these lines are there to add emphasis. So you're starting to see how these lines that they refer us to are often just springboards into the rest of the book that we've studied or the poem that we've studied. They are not limiting us and say, only look at these lines. Sometimes they are, and you have to be awake to that. But often we're trying to see, did you read before this? Did you read after? Do you know what's going on? All right, some other questions here. Number 2, explain the effectiveness of the personification. So, yeah, you wouldn't say just as this is like that. You'd say the conversations are aimed to get to know what progress has been made in finding new ideas for change in the country outside of the country. So personifying the swallows as if you can talk to them symbolizes this idea of talking to things and people that move out of the country. So that's an example of not taking the literal meaning only and seeing that this personification of the swallows is trying to imply that there are people who come around with news. And explain what the speaker means by the words, that words have lost meaning. So yeah, this is a comment on propaganda and censorship and how language fails us. And we get misunderstandings when we try to communicate. So you see, talking to the peach tree, at first I thought, what a silly poem, but it's really quite beautiful in the way it shows the difficulty of communicating effectively. All right, you might get a question asking you to discuss the title, and we reinforce that in paper 1. You must know what the title's supposed to do. It sets up an expectation, and then sometimes it works by breaking down that expectation. All right, so now I'm going to move on to the next poem. But actually before that, look at this answer here. There is dramatic shift in tone in the final 3 lines of the poem when the speaker resolves to address the devil, which is the personification of evil. So here, this is an effective comment on tone because first we said the tone was something else, playful, and now it's that. All right, sonnet 130, lovely. Now, if I was an examiner and I was going to ask a literature essay on structure, I would choose one of these sonnets because it has such a well-researched, obvious structure, and the structure works to express the meaning. So I probably would be very tempted to use one of these. So when you study this poem, you know, for all of the poems, look at what where their strengths are and then focus on that. All right, so you must learn that there are 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. The rhyme scheme looks like this, and this is a parody or a mocking of the conventional love sonnet. It is not a mocking of his beloved, it is a mocking of those poets who use ridiculous figures of speech and actually make themselves into liars by doing so. So there's the poem. You must be able to work out the rhyme scheme yourself, and this blessed friend. I love this poem because it just shows me that real love can exist, even with our warts and our bad breath and so on. And the last rhyming couplet here fits in with the rules of the Shakespearean sonnet, that the rhyming couplet at the end with the GG rhyme scheme is where we'll get our answer to our problem or a change or a solution. And that's just what we get here, isn't it? All along he's saying, oh, she's not like this, she's not like that. And yeah, he says, and yet I think my love is rare as any she belied with false compare. So this is how you should have been making notes in class when your teacher's talking, and also from your own notes. And the point here, the speaker thinks that his mistress is as wonderful and unique or rare as any woman who was ever misrepresented or belied by an exaggerated comparison. So you see how you must have similes which will help you not to just copy out the words of the poem. You must have other words, comparison instead of false compare, so that you can answer in your own words. All right, so here are questions. Identify and explain the figure of speech. That's a fairly low level one, but it's 3 marks because we get marks for identifying and then for explaining it as it's used in these lines. Explain what the speaker suggests about the way she walks. This is about sound because the word treads has the T and the D and it's a heavy sound. This is an example of sound effect. And then discuss the importance of the words and yet. All right, this is important or significant because this is the volta where the tone changes from teasing to praising and sincere. So the structure of the poem is guiding us there as to what's happening. All right, then what is the difference between perceived beauty and actual beauty? Refer to the poem as a whole. So you see again, we have to know about the Elizabethan society, we have to know about the way they wrote, we have to know about what they thought was beautiful, and then we've got to know what we've got in the rest of the poem that shows us these ideas, eyes like the sun and so on. Comment on how the rhyming couplet expresses the speaker's true feelings. Not just tell me, you must tell me and then you must also comment. So the comment is going to be something like, he is showing that these other people are hollow and meaningless, and that he is highlighting that society should not dictate how you express your beauty or what you see as beauty. All right, so I'm going to just move along now. And we're going to move into comparing the 2 sonnet forms. So this is the Shakespearean sonnet, as you well know. There's a poetic turn there. That's where your shifting tone is going to be. And then we have a Petrarchan sonnet that came first, was written by the Italians. And they have an octave and then a sestet. And that is dictated by the rhyme scheme, but also the subject matter. So here we will have an argument, and there we will have a counter argument or a problem and a solution. So when we go on to the next sonnet that we have for study, Beauteous Evening, we will see that Wordsworth has written this poem, and he comes from the Romantic era, so he loves nature, he's against the Industrial Revolution, which is causing pollution and hardship, and he sees God in nature. So we now can work out the rhyme scheme here. It's 14 lines, and if we work out the rhyme scheme, free, none, sun, tranquility, you can see it's A, B, B, A, and it goes on like that to fit in with the octave, oct 4, 8, and sestet 6. So here we see the peaceful atmosphere of the sunset and God's appreciation, and then here talking to his daughter, noticing that she doesn't really have the same reverence, but that she is with God. All right, now look at how some of these questions reveal how you must know a little bit about the poet. What type of sonnet is this? And justify your response. Easy 3 marks if you've studied. Who is being addressed? Yeah, you need to know this is Caroline, the illegitimate daughter of Wordsworth, and it's only for 1 mark, but it helps if you know what is going on. What does the phrase holy time refer to? Just a what question, don't write a whole page. Why is the nun breathless? Because we know that she is serving her God with great respect. And what does the phrase Abram's bosom refer to? In this case, Abram is seen as the father of believers, and the child is in the bosom of that father. All right, so what is the question here? Wordsworth is inspired by a seaside walk he took with his daughter. With close reference to diction, imagery, and tone, describe how the speaker feels about the natural world and his daughter's relationship with it. So obviously the man was worried because this is his child and he hasn't married her mother, and maybe she's not in God's grace. but he now has gone for a walk, and nature has preached to him, and he has realized that his child is innocent and God is in her. All right, so you would then go into looking at the tone, the diction, and that will help you to answer the question there. Another poem we've got is Poem of Return. And here, I want to highlight this to you because this poem has 14 lines, but it is not a sonnet, so don't fall into the trap. It doesn't have the rhyme scheme, it doesn't have the iambic pentameter, and it's far more modern in its expression. All right, but then you might have questions like, what does the word silence suggest? And unfortunately, watch out for this one. Some study guides are saying maybe he's in a land of silence because he's been exiled to a country where he doesn't understand the language, and that is not getting accepted. He has been exiled, he's alone and alienated, and it's more about censorship, and he's being prevented from having influence. In fact, some writers say that he was in prison and then only came back from prison after that for his political beliefs. All right, yeah, this is more of identify and explain the figure of speech. And often in the exam, they will not ask you to identify. They will just ask you to explain and comment on the effectiveness of it. And then discuss the mood. Right, so people always get a little bit of a wobbly when they see they have to discuss the mood. The use of the commanding tone, right? He's, don't give me flowers, don't do this, creates a sense of urgency for the mourning mothers who've lost their sons. The reader is affected by this image of mothers who have empty arms which have been ripped from them. The mood is deeply mournful. So in these lines, bereft, look at that word bereft. What a powerful word. It means that they have been robbed of their sons. All right, here's a nice one. Refer to stanza 3. Critically comment on the appropriateness of the imagery used in this stanza as a conclusion. How do I get my third mark here? That's what we're interested in. All right, so we're going to say this is the imagery, the young man with a stone in his hand and the hatred snaking out of his eyes. We've got to say whether it's appropriate or not. Yes, it's a powerful image because there's so much anger that the defiance is expressed, and it is so sad that this potential in this young person, they couldn't even rebel effectively because their lives were cut short. So the snake's movement is rapid and dangerous. So here what we're doing is we are commenting on the appropriateness when we say that this is a powerful image and the hatred is so strong that it comes out of the child's eyes like a thread through the life, and also so on. But then we are also critically commenting on that when we talk about the potential of the life that is lost and how sad it is that even the stone couldn't be thrown. All right, here we come to this winter coming. Remember that one? And this was at the time of the Soweto uprising when there was a feeling that something ominous was coming. Also stream of consciousness writing. And she feels that the misery and the hunger and the suffering of the poem is so bad, and the difference between the haves and the have-nots, that a harsh time is coming. So this is a beautiful example of winter being a metaphor for times of suffering and deprivation. The mood is anxious, restless, frightened. The tone of the poet is somber, and the themes are the effects of apartheid, and the resistance and hope. I've included these slides that somebody else created. Thanks to them. A lot of this is not my work, but I'm grateful to those who shared. So there we have this idea of winter, connotations of bleakness, bareness, death, the end of life, sadness, hopelessness, pain, despair. You know that it's not really a winter she's talking about, so then you must be able to explain that it is a winter figuratively. Another one there, the diction, which is helping us with mood. This shroud falling as length of cross in which the body is wrapped for burial. All of these things bring across this mood that is very emphasizing death and solemn. Here is one, diction, to emphasize tone. Sad woman, you see, that's the adjective. These women are a tide of sadness, that figure of speech there. We imagine that image of this high tide, and it's just sadness welling up. So that's how we're going to find these things. This word juxtaposition that some people battle with, that is just putting two things next to each other to show the contrast, to help us to see the difference. So yeah, we have children crying versus the madam's house that is clean and picture book. Tombstones versus bright cars. And thin bare twigs versus this raging fire that they just used for. All right, we have themes there. And just to give you an idea, those are written in one word, but in your answer, you're going to have to give a better idea then. Sorry, I've got a dog here that keeps wanting to go in and out. We all have our blessings. And there you see words for mood. It's more about how you and I feel. Here's a nice essay topic, the same old thing. In the poem This Winter Coming, the themes of suffering and deprivation are evident. By close reference to diction, tone, and imagery, discuss to what extent you agree with the above statement. So this is something that comes in with all of our literature essays, to what extent you agree, or discuss the validity of it. All right, and that is a critical comment and evaluation. So let's look at our essay plan here. We would have an introduction, then we would quote words that show diction, like children crying and the barest twigs. Then for the tone, we would name the tone. It's somber, there's winter rain and fear. But you see here, this example doesn't show a shift. In fact, it starts off pretty somber, and by the end, it's even worse. So if you could show that with another example later on, that would help. So the imagery are a tide of sadness and like a mountain crying. You see how those are such big comparisons for feeling. All right, I'm not going to go through that possible answer, but the morning sun is shining. Let's have a look at that. Look at that lovely sun. She's sitting out there enjoying the sun, and then it's making her realize that she's not all that happy. So she's praising beauty and nature and all the sounds, and then she steps away in the last 4 lines, and we find this surprisingly sad tone coming in. So that is making us understand the sadness by having the happiness first. So we have a positive image there first, but then the contrast comes in where we realize that the sun is actually her child that has died. And so this irony here of her sun not shining anymore. And so this happy celebration of nature, such as we found in Fern Hill and in It's a Beauteous Evening, ends up being a lament for the loss of the loved one. She can't feel the happiness, even though it's all around her. So you see how each poem guides you into which areas you must focus on and what they're going to ask about. Look at all the ways that she's evoking our senses, and remember to try to also do that in your own writing. Bring in some comparisons and some lovely figures of speech. All right, now I seem to be stuck. All right, so we're now moving on to looking at the tone and theme. So it starts happy and cheerful, becomes sorrowful and bitter. The move, celebratory, somber and mood and sad. And then the themes, nature is permanent, but loneliness, despair and futility seems to come and go. All right, so I'm not going to go through any of these ones that we've already analyzed, those types of questions, but you go and you underline them like I did, and then you know what to do with them. All right, so now we come to At a Funeral, which was about this nurse who studied and was defeated by death. And the structure is quite formal, and that fits in with a funeral. So the tone is defiant, and the theme is criticizing oppression and really calling people to act and do something about it. So it's a protest poem. And so yeah, we have that juxtaposition, or explain the contrast in colors. So all the vibrant colors of black, green, and gold. It's a happy occasion. There's pageant, not a happy occasion, but usually it would be a celebration or something. And here there's just the mud and the grave. And so that contrast makes us see how miserable the whole situation is. All right, I'm going to move on now to, oh, there's one for ambiguity. Explain the ambiguity in the word plots. So plots can refer to the plot of ground that you get buried in, but also about plans where people are scheming and working against the individual. I'm not going to look at that essay, but the idea is that you go away and you write an essay on each of these poems using the linking of imagery, theme, and tone, imagery, tone, and diction to the message or the theme. And you see, sometimes they tell you the message or the theme, but sometimes they're not kind, and you have to tell them what the theme is and then link it to that. All right, so now we are looking at this poem, and it's free verse, but we have this one-line coda which concludes the story, and it's similar to Shakespeare's rhyming couplets. It comes about bringing us this conclusion. We also have iambic rhythm, da-dum, da-dum, like a seesaw, and we can imagine the protest and the people and the rhythm that goes with their movement. Here's an example of synoptiky. The child is not dead. The child represents all of the young people who have the spirit to rise up. The tone is bold, passionate, inspired. Even though there is sadness about the innocent child's death, there is not a sadness, there's more an outrage and a call to arms. Themes of freedom and resistance are brought in there. And so what is the poet's message? Harsh realities of apartheid, and that freedom cannot be killed. Explain the visual imagery in the first two stanzas. So yeah, you would have to answer for 3 marks and really go into at least 2 examples, one from the first and one from the second. Don't just speak in general terms. Sometimes people lose marks because they speak superficially and very generally, and we can't find their marks. All right, Fern Hill, very long poem, beautiful, lyrical, the tone is important, and there's a shift. So it goes from joy and happiness of being a child to that more sad realization that time is in control and we are all losing our innocence. And then the mood is quite nostalgic and longing. All right, here in this poem, the poet uses a lot of interesting diction. So we have the colors, green, golden, blue, white, and for him, green means fresh and young. All the natural things that are described, the animals, the farm life, the harvest, and then the ideas of the passing of time with the Sabbath and the birth and the first morning. And then also linking this to spiritual life. So you see these poems, in my mind, they start to link, like Wordsworth loving the beach and the sun, and the morning sun is rising, all this idea of nature being wonderful. All right. So number 4 here might be a nice question to look at. Discuss. So we're going to uncircle the discuss word, how time is personified, and then we see that the speaker lived under time, and time was always actually being graceful but controlling. All right, then we come to shipwreck, and it's also quite structured, 4 lines with in 4 stanzas. There's a rhyme scheme that is set, and the first 2 focus on positive news that people have survived, but the last 2 focus on loss. So again, this shifting tone and this contrast. The title makes us already see that this is going to be a sad poem, and we expect this tragedy. But we see many contrasts in the poem between celebration, those who are saved, those who died, and how to respond to this. The tone ends up being quite mournful. And let's look at number 3 here. Account for the personification in when winter shakes the door. Why? Give a reason. That's what account asks you to do. Give a reason for using those words when winter shakes the door. So look at the answer here. On cold winter's night, when the wind is blowing fiercely and rattling the doors of houses, parents will be telling their children about the story of the sailors who died in the shipwreck. Literally, but then figuratively, when we feel down and when we feel the mournfulness coming up in us, we might tell this story. All right, then and account for, also you must give reasons for. I'm going to move on now because it's time. So now we have come to the end of the poems that I wanted to talk about. And I'm not going to go through an unseen poem with you because, as you can see, when you study your seen poems and when you spend time on them, you are training yourself in how to analyze a seen poem. And so the only thing you must do now is have discipline and don't rush through the unseen poem, and use the SIFT method and read it 3 times. Be humble, read the question, underline the action word, do just what we've been doing, and then you should do better than when you just rush away at it and believe you can't do it and just try to get it out of the way. You can get good marks for it. Generally, the unseen poem is set in Africa and something we can relate to. So give it your best and try to get 4, 5, 6 marks there, because generally people don't do too well there. All right, now we're going to go on to section B and C, the contextual questions. And just a few tips. Divide your questions up. Don't just give a vague answer. You know, when you've only read summaries and they ask you something like, why is Dorian Gray increasingly evil? You can't just say because he's influenced by Lord Henry. You've got to really look at the question and see. It usually says refer to this paragraph or something like that. Don't write more than you need to. You haven't got the time to waste. And if it guides you with a specific line reference, you must use that line and then possibly show off your knowledge with the rest of the text, as we've seen with the poetry questions. What to do when they say places extracting context? You must look exactly what happened before this to cause this to happen. Not what happens in the extract, it's not a comprehension, and not what happens after it. So if I say, I couldn't get in onto the Wi-Fi, what happened before that? There was an electrical outage in my area, and what happened before that? Somebody stole a cable. All right, so those 2 things led up to what's happening here. So it needs you to know what's happening in the book and to be able to remember, okay, this happened and then this happened and then that happened. So it's good to write summaries, but it's good to also have read the book to be able to do this. These ones I think we've already covered. When they say using your knowledge of the novel or the play, you must go and give examples from other places and link it to this one. Explain the change in. So there you must say it was like this before and then it became like this and why. If you have to explain on the significance of, you've already seen one of those. You look at the connotations, the ideas, the things that are gathered around this thing that we're discussing. Let's see if we can find an example of that in practice. If you ask something about a character that is typical, you must ground the reference from elsewhere in the text. So if I say that the child is not dead, that child represents all the young people, how can I prove that from the rest of the poem? I must go and see that it's been repeated in many places, and then at the end it says that he will be able to move around without a pass. So you've got to do that with Dorian Gray or with Life of Pi as well. When they ask you to give your opinion, comment on the validity or discuss the extent to which, remember that a mixed response is a very good option, because you are showing that you are quite mature in your ability not to judge things too harshly. If I say, is your brother evil? You'll probably say, no, my brother is naughty, but he's also very sweet. And this is true of our characters as well. If it's good writing, the person will have two sides to them. So usually you can be quite safe in giving a mixed response, but then you must be able to back up both sides. Know what things are like foreshadowing and what it does. It creates tension, it helps us to predict what's coming. And then, of course, you will sometimes get these stage direction questions. But please remember, now you've gone to see the play live at UJ, so you know the actors are up there on the stage and you are sitting in the audience. You cannot see if the person's eyebrow is raised or if there's a tear in their eye. That's television or film. You've now got to have the hand being thrown up, the foot being kicked out, pacing up and down, going down on their knees. Those are stage directions, moving to the front of the stage or the back. Okay, if you want to show feelings on the stage, your actions have to be quite big. And then also, it usually says, how would you direct the actor to behave to show this tone? So then you have to say what the tone is, and then you must also give evidence why the tone would be that. So when Hamlet stabs Polonius, how would you have him act after discovering that it's Polonius? You must say he should act disgusted because Polonius was spying on him and he thought it was Claudius, but still these people have been working against him. So he is surprised, but only that it's Polonius and not Claudius. So there you show your knowledge, the tone, and then the way you would act. Okay. So please get your 3 marks there. Don't just say, oh, he should be sad. All right, so what is a literature essay now? It's an argument. You can have a mixed response. It's academic. And what do you have to argue? You have to look at the statement in the question, if it's valid or not, and then you have to argue why. You always write in the present tense, and you don't have personal pronouns like I. Well, of course you won't, because if you say, I think that Pi is a cannibal, then I just think, well, that's nice. It's your opinion. There's nothing academic about this. But if you say Pi is a cannibal, and you state it as a fact, because I know that he ate someone, then I believe you because you're stating it as a fact. All right, now, something that's important is that the topic always has 2 parts to it. There's the statement and the question. What on earth is the statement there for? The statement creates the background to what the question is going to ask. And sometimes the question just says, is this statement valid? But other times it might bring in more detail to help you. If you just tell the story, you will not earn a good mark, but you do need to know the story to use that as evidence. The more evidence you can give, the more marks you are awarded. But don't fall into the trap of just listing, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. That is not the way to win an argument. You have to package each paragraph and say, so-and-so is lazy, and this is the evidence, and then conclude linking back to the question. Is John lazy? First topic sentence, John is lazy because he doesn't wash the dishes. And then maybe to expand on that, he didn't wash them on Monday and he didn't wash them on Thursday. And then I explain, the dishes are important. They should be washed, otherwise rats could come into the house. And the fact that he knows that's his job shows that he is lazy. So I'm then linking it back. All right. And when you study, you must be able to talk about characters and themes. So in your study now, you know, you can only enjoy the literature at this point in the year when you've read and you've discussed, and now you can actually get into critical analysis. This character's like that, that character's like that. No, I think this is one of them. Which one is stronger? This is the time now when you can actually look at the themes and the characters and how it develops. But you will use your knowledge of the plot to do that. Okay, so what do we have to do? We have to answer one question on the novel and 1 question on a drama, and only one of them must be an essay and one of them must be a contextual. Remember, if you write 2 literature essays, one of them will be crossed out and you'll get 0. And the same if you do 2 contextuals. Don't do that. And another thing that I see is people don't do a little brainstorm. You spend 3 hours doing paper 3, but with the literature essay, you just start. And I think it's because you're afraid of time. But remember, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So just go to that topic, underline it, break it down, do a little brainstorm. Maybe you go back to the poetry, then you come back, you add a few things, so that at least now you're going to get the best benefit. You haven't got time to do a rough draft and a neat, but you do have time to at least marshal your thoughts like that. So read the topic carefully, circle the task words, underline the knowledge words. So these are words that are asking you about theme or character. What do I need to show I know? And then think about how you're going to answer it. Bring in some quotes or evidence. Remember, you don't have to only have quotes. You can just give examples of things that happened. And then write your final essay, read through it, try to correct some errors. If you've slipped up and done a little bit of contractions or using personal pronoun I, you can just fix it. And then you use the Peel method, right? So you can say, I do agree, I don't agree, I agree to this extent and I disagree to that extent. But then each time you make your point, you explain, you give evidence and you link. All right, so here are nice words that you can use. You're not going to say, in my opinion, when you sum up your point. You're going to say the writer uses, firstly, secondly, and here when you give your evidence, for example, this can be seen, but you're not going to say we know this because. Why? Because we is including you, as if you're just having a chat about your Saturday night. And then your explanation, we're going to use quotations, but we can give examples. Quotations can be very impressive. We think, oh, this person, they can even quote. But if you're going to misquote, that thing backfires. So if you're not good at quoting, then rather take the safe option and just relate what happens. All right, let's look at how to break down a topic. So you get a topic like this one. The picture of Dorian Gray, the ability to distinguish between art and reality has tragic consequences. Critically assess the validity of the above statement. Right, so that is my question. Is this valid? Is it true? I'm going to now break it down and do a mind map. Yes, in this way it's not true, and in that way it is true. I'm going to list examples there. So is it that because he doesn't know the difference between art and reality, it ends up in tragedy? So now I have to say, is this true or not? And then where have I got examples to prove it, and then explain. Here's an example from Pi. The novel Life of Pi suggests that despite offering contradictory approaches to life, reason and faith can coexist. Critically discuss the extent to which you agree with the above statement. All right, so this is another question on theme. And notice now, sometimes it's also a bit tricky because here there are 2 parts within this. The picture of Dorian Gray, the inability to distinguish between art and reality has tragic consequences. So some people go and talk about the not being able to see the difference between art and reality, and they talk about Dorian, and they forget to also talk about the tragic consequences. And that is where we see people dropping in their essay mark down to moderates. So go in A and B. And the same here. The novel of Life and Pi suggests that despite offering contradictory approaches to life, reason and faith can coexist. So yes, there are contradictory approaches to life, A, but B, reason and faith can coexist. So that's the A and the B, and if you show understanding of the topic, you will be able to argue both of those things, and that gives you the higher mark. It's like a discriminator to separate the sheep from the goats. All right, you can get a topic on character. Is it true that those we meet can change us, sometimes so profoundly that we are not the same afterwards? Critically discuss the validity of the statement in relation to Dorian Gray or to Pi. So how are those 2 characters influenced to the point that they have changed? And that is actually a lovely topic, but you can go into, again, have a mixed response and say, well, there are things that are still there from when they were, what they were like before, but then there are ways in which they've changed. Alrighty, now we're going to move on to how to write your introduction. And some of us know TACO. Usually we know tag, the title, the author, and the genre. But TACO is give the keywords in the question and O for outline the main points. I quite like that. Why do we have TACO? Because imagine your essay sitting on a table somewhere and somebody's going to read it. They don't want to be guessing what this essay is about and what you're arguing. Your introduction must introduce them. So you must tell them which poem, who wrote it, and what the question is that you're answering. So you will tell the reader precisely what you're going to do and even give them an idea. So let's take the first sentence. In the play Hamlet by William Shakespeare, or in the novel Life of Pi, there's your genre, your title, and your author. Remember, some poems have the same title and a different author. Then we have our thesis statement in the introduction, sentence 2. Here you are telling the reader why you're writing this. So you will show what the question is, word it in your own words, and then show us what you're going to focus on. So whether it's the themes, the characters, and so on. All right. So here's a little crucible essay for us to think about, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I want us to work on it. Because I think sometimes it's the way the topic is written that makes people not know what to say. But if you just looked at this one, this is John Proctor. John is a good man, and it is this fact which adds to the tragic nature of the drama. Discuss the validity of this statement. So sometimes the examiner will say, this is a noble man who is brought to tragic consequences. And all they're really saying is that he's a good man, and that is why this is a tragedy. What happens in the play is a tragedy. All right, so you do a little mind map and you think of whatever comes to mind. He is flawed, but he lives in a very hypocritical society and he's straight, and that's why they punish him for it. He is not so great because he's unfaithful to his wife. And you know, when you're a teenager, it seems that that means to you that he should be shot at dawn. But he has other redeeming qualities. He's very honorable to his family name. And in the end, his wife says he has his goodness now and she will not take it from him. And in the end, he dies when he shouldn't. He was an innocent man who died. So that adds to the tragedy. So now you're going to do that, a little mind map, and then you're going to add and add and add. Please do that on your own if you're studying the Crucible. And then build that into an essay with the format that I've explained. And you can have your teacher check it for you to see if you're on the right track. All right, so you can take this example now about this Othello essay and also relate it to either the Crucible or Hamlet. So the topic, Shakespeare's Othello centralizes on a character's transformation from being honorable to someone who is blinded by jealousy, which causes his inevitable destruction. So you see, that's the same topic. He is a hero, he's the protagonist, but he has this fatal flaw, and that's his jealousy. But that flaw came to bear only to his destruction. So it's a character transformation that we're interested in, and how this made him jealous. All right, so I'm not going to go through how to write the introduction there because we've already talked about it, but let's look how you actually do this. So we're going to start with a general statement about the text. The drama Othello is underpinned by jealousy and inner conflict, right? I'm telling you that. This is what I believe the book is about, but I'm not going to say I believe this, I just say it is like that. Then I write a statement about the character. The limitation in the question is we're talking about Othello now. So the protagonist, Othello, is besieged by a weakness that leads to his fated physical destruction. All right, so his tragic flaw is this insecurity and jealousy. But look how they've used a word like besieged. It sounds so good. Use it if you can, but don't use it incorrectly. Rather stick with simple English that is correct if you are trying to get good marks. Then we're going to write a statement about the character that addresses the topic. Othello enjoys success in the combat zone. He's a great soldier, which gives him the reputation as Venice's most competent general. However, his dramatic flaw of jealousy leads to his downfall. So yeah, I'm making my statement, and I'm not doing the peel. I'm not giving my evidence and all of that, because this is just the introduction. I'm making a statement for the whole essay now. And then I state what my essay is about. The destruction of Othello is a result of uncontrollable and insatiable jealousy. So there I am nailing my colors to the mask, and I'm saying my essay is going to prove this, that his destruction is because of his jealousy. All right, so then I'm going to go on and win this argument, because it's all very well to say this is what I'm going to prove to you, but then you've got to do it. All right, so in paragraph 2, we're going to have our point for the peel. The divide between Othello and Desdemonia's status results in his insecurity. All right, that's my topic sentence. And now I'm going to give my evidence from the text. When Othello is asked to go to Cyprus to fight the Turks, he insists that this disposition be arranged for Desdemona as levels with her breeding. So he is insecure and he lacks the soft parts of conversation. So he feels that it's suitable for him. And then he feels that his lack of sophistication with the other Venetians is such that he doesn't really deserve his wife. So he feels unworthy because of not being accepted. He's just a killer in a war, and he's gained status because of that. So even though she loves him, he doesn't believe it. And then we see that this jealousy is used and exploited by Iago, and this turns him into this cripple who cannot function because he's so jealous. Right, now we go to paragraph 3, and it's our second argument. Iago ignites the latent jealousy in Othello. Right, so Othello has changed. It was there, but it wasn't ruling him. Iago wakes it up. So, having married a woman of unparalleled beauty and nobility, Othello feels unworthy, and Iago manages to take advantage of his credulity, his trusting nature, and brainwash him gradually into believing that Desdemona has had recent affairs with Cassio. Eventually, his jealousy brews into a fiery rage, and his rampaging later takes such an emotional toll on him that he goes into an involuntary trance, and even his wife says, and we can use a quote, that he doesn't understand the fury in your words, but not your Othello's words. So she cannot understand why he's so angry. So what we are proving here is that Othello had latent, or he had hidden jealousy, and he had hidden insecurity, and he was a violent man. But he was not ruled by those things. After Iago works on him, they own him. All right, so now we're going to explain this. Iago treacherously plants Desdemona's hanky, a marriage gift from Othello, in Cassio's lodgings. The handkerchief in Cassio's possession is used as ocular evidence of an extramarital affair, but in reality, both Cassio and Desdemona are innocent and loyal to their moral position. So there you are showing off what you know, and the fact, you've stated that Iago does this, but we need to now have you explain it to us how he does this. And then we link to the topic. Othello's jealousy causes him to plan the murder of his loving wife and his dutiful officer Cassio. So now he has changed. And remember, we are warned by the examiners and the markers. Don't just go and say, and therefore we can see that Othello has changed, which some people do. They just stick the sentence at the end of every paragraph. You've actually got to link it to the topic for us. Think of us as slow learners who need to have that link at the end. Right, now we come to our next argument. Iago's jealousy chiefly results in Othello's destruction. So it's not only Othello's jealousy, but Iago's as well. Iago is jealous of Othello's stature and that he gives Cassio the position of lieutenant, and he foot on the battlefield, and Othello is chosen to have a better an affection and not by older gradation. So he has managed to favor someone without waiting for the experience that should come with that promotion. And he claims that the lusty Moor hath leapt into my seat, suggesting that Othello has engaged in sexual relations with his wife Amelia. So he's jealous as well of his own wife. You know, sometimes people who are jealous are people that are also disloyal. So this fills Iago with rage and jealousy. He's therefore on a quest to avenge what he believes is unfairness, and this proves that the catalyst in Iago's plan of revenge is jealousy. The jealousy is caused partly by Othello denying him the promotion, and his unrelenting pursuit of revenge ends up with Othello being convinced that Desdemona has cheated on him, which sets Othello out to destruction. So this is an interesting take on the topic there. It's not just Othello's jealousy, but jealousy in general. So yeah, we round off our argument. Jealousy is inherently unreasonable. However, it is this flaw in Othello's character that rendered him susceptible to the evil grips of the green-eyed monster. This essay explored how jealousy, either innate, as in Iago's jealousy, or incited, as in that of Othello's, inadvertently leads to Othello's destruction. All right, so it's quite fun, isn't it? We work out what we want to say. We've got 3 paragraphs. We make 3 aspects for our argument, and then we conclude and we tell everybody that obviously we're right. Here's a question on Hamlet. The play Hamlet reflects universal predicaments that have always confronted mankind. The desire to take revenge, rejected love and parent-child conflicts. Hamlet, more than any other character in the play, feels these predicaments more painfully. Comment on the validity of the above statement. Is this true? All right, so the fancy words here. Reflects universal predicaments that have always confronted mankind. All right, universal problems. The desire to take revenge. That is one thing I'm going to talk about, which is a universal problem. I'm going to put an A there. Rejected love and parent-child conflict. So rejected love, I'm going to put a B there, and then parent-child conflict, I'm going to put a C there. So now this examiner has been so kind to me. I know what my 3 paragraphs have to be about, and then I just have to link it and say that that is what this play is about, and that Hamlet feels this more painfully. So like the poetry, where you link diction, imagery and tone to the message, yeah, you're going to link these 3 things to Hamlet's pain. All right, so let's see how we go about this. We're going to use the Peel method, and we can also look at the Pye essay and talk about how Pye's life in Pondicherry gives him a solid foundation for coping with hardships that he faces. Discuss the validity. So I think you're starting to understand that there are pitfalls you can fall into, but generally the questions are similar. The only problem with working through past papers is that if you're going to practice the essay that was in last year's exam, that's great for practice, but that will never be in this year's exam because they're not going to have the same question. So it's good to do have a whole range of questions. For instance, there's a question on the foils in Hamlet, which I haven't seen come up for a long time. So they might ask that. So you mustn't just look at recent past papers. You should explore all essay topics and discuss with your friends. And, you know, I think Hamlet is a coward, and no, I don't. Those things are good for you. All right, so here's the paragraph on how to answer the Pye essay. The novel Life of Pye is underpinned by themes of religion and human faith in God. The protagonist is a devout follower of 3 very different religions. The human capacity for reason is contrast to religious faith, and most poignantly, or most interestingly and sadly, when Pye is adrift on the Pacific Ocean, where his faith, together with the knowledge he has accrued, enables him to survive. This analysis this analysis factors that contributed to Pi being able to survive seemingly unsurmountable odds, proving that Pi's early childhood days enabled him to survive in the face of adversity. So do you see now how that last sentence there makes me understand that this argument is not futile? I was wondering, what's this about religion? How does this answer about his childhood? But he was raised with these religions and so on. So it does, in fact, and that last sentence links it for me. So now paragraph 2, his childhood memories in the zoo are not just nostalgic, but they were lessons for him about nature, the nature of animals. And we remember when his father fed the goat to the caged tiger to teach Pi and his brother about the danger posed by wild animals. Pi learned at tender age about the distance at which an animal will tolerate a potential threat. And now look at that. The writer didn't have to say, and his brother Ravi. But when I'm reading this, this child knows what they're talking about. He even knows the brother's name's Ravi. So you see, when you can have details that are specific and prove your knowledge, you impress the reader and you get good marks. This knowledge was galvanized when he was forced to share a boat with the Bengal tiger. His childhood experiences paved the way for his later understanding of territoriality, whereby animals are fiercely defensive of their area, whilst on the boat he never invaded his space, nor did he antagonize him. All right, so that's a line of argument there. Religion proves to be foundation from which he draws his strength and desire to survive. Wakes up in the middle of the night, is overwhelmed with feelings of insignificance, remembers a Hindu story of a character named Markandeya. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, apologies. Pi says, I was alone and orphaned in the middle of the Pacific, hanging onto an oar, and adult tiger in front of me, sharks beneath me, a storm raging about me. Pi's refusal to consider his predicament in the light of reason opens up space for his faith in God to flourish, and this faith sustains him even through the darkest, most fearful moments. So he is strengthened to keep on fighting for his life, where his faith, not his reason, enables Pi to survive. So really, if you were looking at your reason, you would say these are not conditions that can be survived. And then we come to our third line of argument. But now notice, we make our point, we create our evidence, we explain, and we link. Let's look at the first point. Mr. Kumar's devotion to the power of scientific inquiry and explanation inspires Pi to study. What's the link? Pi uses his knowledge to great extent on the lifeboat so he can coexist with Richard Parker. Pi makes sure that Richard Parker never sees Pi as possible prey. All right, so our first sentence and our last one is almost like our introduction and our conclusion. It tells us what this paragraph is going to be about, and it sells it to us that it has successfully done its job. Good, so let's look at other things about the conclusion. The conclusion must answer the so what question. So you've presented the essay, you've given your evidence, and I'm thinking, so what? But it ends the argument with your final decision. You can't leave it floating. You can't use a rhetorical question. You've got to make up your mind because you've been arguing this. It's like a lawyer saying he's going to defend you so that you don't have to go to jail. And then in the final paragraph, he says, well, maybe he is guilty, you decide. I would fire that lawyer and actually make sure I put something spicy in his tea. So you have to know where you stand by the time you come to your conclusion. Based on the evidence discussed in this essay, it is clear that and then you give your thesis statement. So here's one. Pi Singh Patel chronicled his struggle not only to survive against starvation and thirst, but also his struggle to avoid being eaten by a Bengal tiger aboard a boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Right? I've summarized. Now I show that I've proven my thesis. And we don't say in my essay. This is a bad example here. Please don't look at it. We would rather say this essay has proven that an amalgamation of childhood memories, lessons he drew from relationships, scientific knowledge, and religious faith enabled his protagonist to conquer this colossal faith. So we here are just naming what our paragraph's arguments were to remind the reader that we have proven this to them. Here's a Dorian Gray essay. The novel Dorian Gray cautions against a life of self-indulgence and narcissism. Self-love and selfishness. Isn't that nice of them, telling you what those things are? But I think by the time you've studied the book, you know. Living a life without boundaries can have dire consequences. Critically discuss the extent to which you agree with the above statement. So there's a lot there. A life of self-indulgence or hedonism, a life without boundaries, and narcissism, which is a little different. Say, narcissism is self-love, whereas self-indulgence is spoiling yourself and just living for the moment. And then the third point there is that it has bad consequences. So critically discuss the extent to which you agree with the above statement. You can now go and take each of those and say, well, in this way it's true and in that way it's not. I could say it doesn't have dire consequences for Lord Henry, but it does for Dorian Gray. And then I could argue that. All right, here is a lovely marking grid to show you when you look at the marking rubric, maybe you don't make head or tail of it because your eyes have to dance all over the place. But this is a simple way that you can think, when I look at my essay, what mark should I get? And this is for the content mark. If you write your own story, you're going to get 0. If you don't finish your story, you're going to get 1. If you don't complete your essay, but you write a paragraph or 2, you're probably going to get 2 for content. If you don't know the plot and you are naming a correct character here or there, but you're making mistakes, this is still going to be a fail and you're going to get 3. If you tell the story but it's wrong, but you do actually have the right characters and so on, you're going to fail but almost be at a pass. If you tell the story and you don't have any argument, but you do know the characters and so you're telling the story, you're not arguing your point, there's a few mistakes, you're still not good, not well, not really passing, but you are at least aware of the story and you are able to name it and tell the story. Then for 6, you tell the story and you know it accurately, but you don't argue, you don't answer the topic, you just tell me what happens in the story. And maybe there's a mistake, like a little slip where you link to the topic. You just say, well, because Claudius is a selfish man, he killed his own brother. And the topic was, how is Claudius evil? Then you sort of said that, but you just said it by mistake, but we will still credit that. And then if you accurately tell the plot and you have a few ideas that link with the topic, we will give you a 7. So now you're getting into the moderate and that's a pass. I'm just trying to encourage you. Don't leave it out. Don't be paralyzed by fear, because we want to know that you read that book. So if you are getting the plot correct, you have read the book. You have not answered the question and you don't understand the question, but you do understand the book. So we will just slide you through a pass in content as long as you really do just touch on the topic a little bit. And then here for 8, there's some argument, but it's very superficial. Some points relate to the topic, but not well substantiated. And you don't give clear examples or good ones. And you do have an intro and conclusion. So you must make sure you write an introduction and conclusion. Even if they say time's up, you just dash out a quick conclusion so we can put you in this category. But you see, I'm very sad to say many people are finding themselves in this moderate category because you think just listing a whole lot of evidence is creating an argument. And that's because you're used to doing that. You want to have an increase in your pocket money, so you tell your parents, but I did this and I did this. I washed the dishes, I mowed the lawn, and I washed your car, so give me more money. And it doesn't work like that. You actually have to convince them. I have done it carefully, and I did what you asked me to, and you said that I should prove myself, and these are the way. Do you see? You have to link it and place an argument around it. Anyway, going on, when there's an argument, but you haven't really answered the whole question. Remember when I showed there are 2 parts to the question, maybe you only on one part and then you don't back yourself up well. Or for you do answer the whole question and you do understand the topic, but you've messed up a little bit when you recall events. You know, sometimes people say that Hamlet went to Scotland instead of England, things like that. And then if your essay is well written and you've got all the characters right and most of your arguments are well backed up, then you'll get this skillful. It's a good B. To move into exceptional, it's very coherent. All the points are elaborated and clearly discussed. No vague points and no talking about something off the topic. Remember, when you edit, check that you're on topic the whole time. Don't go chasing after rabbits. And for this lovely full mark business, you use the Peel method. There's no narration which goes nowhere. And you show knowledge of the text that is superior. You can think critically and prove yourself well. All right, now when we come to the expression, if we can't read it, if it's incomplete, if you don't use English and we can't understand it, you're going to be down here. If you've written it in English, but we can't read it well and we don't really understand, only here and there we can understand, then you're going to be in the moderates. For higher moderates, we can read it, but all the mistakes are so many that we don't really clearly know what you're arguing. But now to get into skillful, I see your argument. The spelling mistakes are not stopping me from understanding. We've got an introduction, a conclusion, and paragraphs. So you see how important these things are because they put you into this category. And then here, there's no vagueness. And in this one, no mistakes, good introduction. And in this one, for 10 out of 10, you've got something that is flawless and convincing. Remember, you know, it's not enough to just not make any spelling mistakes. You've got to write convincingly. All right, so what do we do about contextual questions? I'm sorry, I'm going fast, and I do thank you for sticking with me. I'm hoping to share these slides, and then you can go through them at your leisure. But it's good that we're focusing here because often we don't find the time to go through them. I've talked about these different types of questions, so I'm going to just skip along here. But here's a nice one about placing the passage in context. If you are given this quote and then you have to place it in context, we're going to say, the third night she had been playing Rosalind. I could not help going round. I had thrown her some flowers and she had looked at me. At least I fancied that she had. The old Jew was persistent. He seemed determined to take me behind, so I consented. It was curious, my not wanting to know her, wasn't it? Okay, place it in context. What happened just before this for this conversation to be happening? Dorian had been encouraged to see new adventures with by Lord Henry. And so he was wandering around in the poorer parts of London and came across this theatre. Do you see that tick there? This is where the mark is coming. There he saw Sybil Vane act and convinced himself that he's in love with her. Another tick. Here he reports to Lord Henry that he has adventured and found art and beauty and love. So I'm telling you what has brought the scene about. And that's what I want to know. In the Crucible, here's an example. Danforth is glad that Hale has come back to work, and he says that the prisoners won't change their minds. And then Danforth said, you must understand, I cannot pardon these when 12 are already hanged. And so, yeah, we see, if we place it in context, this is the morning when Proctor, Rebecca, and Martha are hanging. After denouncing the court, Hale has returned, right? Tick. I see there's glad he's come back. His conscience cannot allow the loss of so many innocent lives. He returns to plead with the prisoners to confess to witchcraft and save their lives. So in other words, to lie. And then Danforth has been told of Abigail and Mercy Lewis stealing money from Paris and running away, so he's conciliatory. He realizes that these girls are in fact dishonest. All right, so if you've got any doubt about one, you see why I want you to get that right is it's 3 marks. It's an entry-level question, but it's actually quite difficult to get those marks because you have to have exact knowledge of what happened to lead up to this. So practice those, and they are entry-level questions, but they require quite a good knowledge of the text. All right, now we've got some examples of these kind of contextual questions, and I just want you to see what we must do with these ones. Account for the reason why Basil does not want to exhibit his painting. Account for means I must give reasons or explain why. So I'm looking for the reason why Basil doesn't want to exhibit his painting, and I need to have knowledge about him and about the plot. So it's for 3 marks. I can't just say one thing. He worships Dorian so much, and he feels he has captured his feelings for Dorian in the painting, and he doesn't want anybody else to realize his feelings for Dorian. All right, so he wants to hide his love for Dorian. And he also thinks that the painting will show to everybody how he feels. So not only does he feel embarrassed about putting his feelings into the painting, he doesn't want other people to see it and realize. So that's where our 3 marks come from. Then 1.2, discuss how Lord Henry's comment shows his aesthetic view of life, this idea that Dorian is like a narcissist. When you discuss, you give the facts and evaluate them, all right, in literature. So you'll give a definition, explain what aestheticism is, and then discuss how Lord Henry fits in with this. So remember the themes in Dorian Gray, hedonism and aestheticism. Make sure that you got it right in your head and you can talk about it. All right, so aestheticism champion pure beauty and art for art's sake, emphasizing the visual and sensual qualities of art and design over practical, moral, and narrative considerations. Lord Henry and the society he lives in believes that beauty is the most important thing in the world. This is shown in the way that he dismisses Basil's appearance, as well as the comment that beauty and intellect cannot coexist. So he implies that beauty is far more important. So again, yeah, I couldn't really come up with that answer unless I took the trouble to go back and see that whole quote. More important than being intelligent is beauty, and this forms the basis of Henry's corruption of Dorian in telling him about the importance of his beauty. So you see how they mark it? 3 marks for any 3 relevant points or for any 2 points well discussed. And there's a lot there that you have to show you understand. You must understand what Lord Henry is like. You must understand asceticism, and then you must also understand how he corrupted Dorian. All right, so here's another one. Refer to lines 3 to 5. Briefly comment on the significance of Henry's words to Dorian here. So this is one of those significance ones. You need knowledge of Dorian's character and the plot and themes, and how these words here are significant for showing the other parts in the novel. I'm just going to go on here to Pi so that you also get a chance, those who are studying Pi. Account for Pi's feelings. You have to give reasons or explain why he feels that way. And again, you're going to have to look at other parts in the knowledge of the story to back that up. And then let's find another one for you that's interesting. This essay topic maybe. The manner in which Pi fights to survive diminishes his humanity. So that other essay was suggesting that he was raised well and therefore he could survive. But here it's suggesting that his need to survive caused him to be less of a decent human being. So what would we consider? The extent to which the statement is true. Is it completely true or partly true or not true at all? And again, the topic, the statement has 2 parts. You must consider Pi's fight for survival, and then you must also consider whether or not this lessens his humanity. Critically discuss means you must evaluate the topic and interpret it, and then give your answer. So I can tell you now, and I feel quite confident in saying it, that your question in the exam is going to have 2 parts to it. So don't miss the second part and don't miss what you've got to evaluate. All right, looking at Hamlet contextuals, place this passage in context. I think we've discussed that enough. This one's a bit small for me to see. I like this one. Refer to this line where he stabs King Claudius. Do you think in seeking revenge, Hamlet loses his moral integrity? Justify your answer for 3 marks. Right, a lovely one. But this answer is not going to be taken from this extract, is it? You're going to have to look back and give examples of where his focus on revenge has caused him to lose his morality. And then the irony in crying treason, you would have to show that Laertes has been more than happy to support a traitorous king. All right, let me look at this one. Using your knowledge of the play as a whole, comment on the change that has come upon Laertes. All right, so now I think we want to move on because, oh, there we are. How's that for good timing, ladies and gentlemen? It is now 3:59. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me for 177 slides, and I hope that this has helped, and I do hope that you will go and access past papers, 5 past papers, and work through them, but then also think about other topics that you can find that you might be able to use. Fatima, do you want to take questions or?
No. Hi, Michelle. We're not going to take any questions. Ladies and gents, first I'd like to say thank you to Michelle for this lovely presentation, a very detailed presentation. We'd also like to please remind educators that we will make the presentation available, that you can actually do it again with your learners in class and go through it with them at a slower pace, maybe in more detail. But I think Michelle did an excellent job. Thank you so much, Michelle. What I'd like to say also is thank you to everybody that attended. Thank you to the educators and thank you to the subject advisors available, which was Michelle Haynes, Ayanda Khadebe, as well as Rebecca Dimakatsu-Mbata. Thank you to our CESs that have stayed through the entire presentation with us, especially Mrs. Naranjeni Naidu, who was monitoring everything and checking everything. Thank you so much. We appreciate all your support for the Johannesburg region and for putting English home language first. And ladies and gents, have a lovely afternoon. God bless and take care.
Thank you so much, Fatima, for all of your managing and your good impetus. Appreciate it.
Have a lovely afternoon, everybody. God bless. Bye.
Bye.
And